Hello, how's it going everybody? Welcome to my first desktop distro challenge, where I try out an alternative desktop Linux distribution for at least 1 week and give my thoughts and impressions on it. Now for this, I've actually installed an additional solid state drive into my desktop so that it's a fair test against my main daily driver. And I'll also attempt to use the distribution for these challenges exclusively for at least that 1 week. And sometimes I'll use it for longer. Sometimes I might use it for 2 or 3 weeks. I've used many distributions of Linux throughout the years, depending on the purpose. That's the great thing about Linux, there's different Linux distributions designed exclusively for different reasons. Like you'll have Kali Linux for pen testing, or it used to be called Backtrack. Then you've got distributions especially for the Raspberry Pi, and you've got distributions especially for servers. And for servers, I always go with CentOS, unless for some bizarre reason I need 32-bit support. Then I go with like the last supported version of Ubuntu server for 32-bit, or Debian sometimes. And for Linux desktops and laptops, I usually go with Debian / Ubuntu based distributions and choose one that's the best fit for the specs of that machine. Like an old laptop that doesn't have a very good battery, I might use L or X Ubuntu. So I'm very happy with Ubuntu and have been using it since version 7.04, so I've been using it for over a decade. And I'm not looking to replace it, but sometimes it's fun to explore and try new things, which is what I'm doing in these distro challenges. Now, I'm probably not going to do these very often because they are very time consuming. Setting up a new install and configuring it and getting it how I like it can sometimes take a long time. And learning to use new package managers also can take a bit of a learning curve. So for this video, as you probably saw in the title, I'll be trying the Arch-based distribution Manjaro Linux. So some of the things I'm going to be looking out for in desktop Linux distros is the ease of installation. I also want to be able to install the proprietary NVIDIA drivers. I don't like that they're proprietary, but it is what it is. I expect to be able to game on it. I want to be able to install Steam and use Proton and play VR games as well. Now, I always choose Gnome as my desktop of choice. I expect to be able to install Gnome Tweaks very easily and get all that working and be able to customize Gnome. And I also expect Nextcloud integration. And now, if you use Gnome, that should just work. So if it doesn't just work, if I'm using Gnome, then I think there's something severely wrong with that distribution. I also expect to be able to easily install stable versions of applications. I also expect to be able to easily migrate my configurations from my main distro so that when I start up Thunderbird, everything just works as it did on my main distro. So these are the things that I'm going to be basing my opinion on after trying the distributions. So after installing Manjaro, the installation was very smooth and easy. It automatically detected my time zone. It handled the partitioning very smoothly. I just selected the SSD and it set up the boot partition, set up the main partition, and it created the swap for me. The installation was very fast, and the boot time when I first booted into that install was also very fast. Now, the default Manjaro theming wasn't to my liking. I know that's personal preference, some people might like it. But I also faced another interesting issue when I first started using Manjaro. That was on my primary monitor, everything appeared to be undersaturated and have a green tint to it, and all the whites looked really weird. Now, you can't see it in this recording because OBS wasn't capturing what I was seeing for some reason. When I looked at the OBS recording, everything looked normal. And it took me ages to figure out what the hell was going on. And it turned out to be night mode. And the thing was, this was actually hurting my eyes, and that might be because I've got a visual impairment and sensitivity to some types of light, but turning off the night mode fixed it, and then it wasn't hurting my eyes anymore. So one of the cool things about Manjaro is it comes with Gnome Tweaks. Now, any distribution that ships Gnome should come with Gnome Tweaks. So I was easily able to start customizing my Gnome desktop, and I installed the browser add-ons for Firefox to install my own themes and extensions. And I found LBRY in the Arch user repository so that I could have my live desktops. So Manjaro offer many different officially supported desktop environments. The default offering is XFCE, but they also have a KDE Plasma flavor and GNOME. And they've also got a version called Architect, which lets you customize your installation at the install process. So you can choose which kernel you want, and you can choose whether you want the stable branch, testing, or unstable. And you can choose which shell you want, like Bash or ZFS, and you can install the whichever drivers you want at the install process as well. So that version could be quite interesting. I might have to try it sometime. So sometimes you might want to install a specific version of a package. Now using apt, you'd use a tool like Madison to do so. So I had to figure out how to do this using Pacman. And the helpful Manjaro wiki recommended a tool called Downgrade. So I tried using Downgrade, but then it complained that I needed to set a variable to do so. So I exported that variable to try to set that environment variable, and it still wouldn't work. But then eventually I got it to work by passing the variable to the command on the same line, and it worked. So I like to play computer games. One of the cool things about Manjaro Linux is it comes with the Steam client. Now some people might have a problem with that because it's proprietary. I'm sure there's an option to turn that off in the install process, or they could grab the Architect installer and choose not to install it. So running games through Proton worked fine. Now I didn't think I would have a problem with that because after all Proton's just a compatibility layer. Now where I thought I might run into issues is running native Linux games through Steam, as they'll have their own dependencies and they'll search for libraries maybe in the wrong place or something like that. So one of the first native Linux games I tried was Civilization 6, and it would not launch. But all I had to do was preload a library to get that to work. But then I thought, well, I'm going to try a much older native Linux game. So I tried Trine, and that just worked. And it also had no problem detecting controllers. So these just worked as well. I didn't need to install any libraries or anything. And the VR games ran just as smooth as they do on Ubuntu, which is also to be expected because most VR games you have to use Proton for.
Alex, up here! You're gonna need a gun! Don't worry, it's unloaded. It's unloaded now!
In my short time using Manjaro, I've noticed that the applications from their main repositories that I've installed are all very stable versions of those applications. A great example is Kdenlive. Now this application has some very unstable builds out there, and the version it installed for me is very stable, and it's only crashed on me once. I think it's more stable than the version Ubuntu installed for me. Also what's really cool is a lot of these applications in their main repo have been compiled with features that the main upstream developers have chosen to no longer support, such as NVIDIA hardware encoding. So when I installed OBS, it came with the NVIDIA hardware encoding feature, which is really cool. To get that on Ubuntu, you would either have to compile FFmpeg with that feature, or use a snap. I choose not to use snaps, so on Ubuntu I have to compile FFmpeg with hardware encoding. I think maybe I have to compile OBS, I can't remember. Yeah, it's really convenient just to have those features already compiled and in there, because these are features people want. So I found the stock Manjaro repositories contained most of the software that I needed. And in the cases it did not, I found it in the Arch user repository. The Arch user repository contains build scripts for software. And what's really handy is you can view to see where they're pulling that source code from. You know, just make sure they're pulling it from upstream and not some dodgy, mysterious site where the source code may have been altered to do malicious things. The Arch user repository also contains alternative builds of the software contained in the stock repos, which might have experimental features that you might want to try. Manjaro's mirrors were very fast. I could download and install packages very fast. It was also nice to see that Pac-Man had auto-completion, because some distros ship their package managers without that feature, and auto-completion is very fast. You don't always know the full name of the package you're trying to install, and when you're installing multiple packages at once, auto-completion is very handy. So I really enjoyed using Manjaro Linux. It's a top-notch desktop distribution. If I had to nitpick, there'd just be a few minor things, like there should be a shortcut key to open up the terminal by default. I mean, one of the first things after I had installed Manjaro Linux that I tried to do was, oh, I wonder what terminal they use. And I tried Control-Alt-T, nope, Control-Shift-T. Oh, it's not configured to open up a terminal, so I had to set up a shortcut key to open the terminal. Now, there are some drawbacks to using a distribution like Manjaro Linux. With Ubuntu, you have a lot of repositories from upstream developers that you can add to Ubuntu to install packages, and they're supported by the upstream developers if you install packages this way. With a distribution like Manjaro Linux, you're less likely to find these type of repositories. Also, when a lot of the packages you're installing are from the Arch user repository, it takes longer to install packages this way because they're built from source. And occasionally you're going to get packages in there that are not pulling the source code from upstream or a legitimate source. And you're going to get people who accidentally install malicious software on their computer from time to time. Now, I'm sure a lot of most Manjaro users are cautious about using the Arch user repository, and they just go in there and they verify pulling the source code from upstream before they install it, but not everyone's always going to do that. When you're using a distribution like Ubuntu that's also used heavily in the enterprise, you know that everything from the Ubuntu main repo has gone through security audits and some pretty heavy scrutiny. Now, I'm sure everything from the Manjaro core repo has also gone through security audits, but I don't know enough about the Manjaro team and the development process to know whether it's been put through the same amount of scrutiny as everything from Ubuntu main. Now, judging from the amount of polish and how stable this distribution is, I'm sure it has. So, to wrap things up, I really love Manjaro Linux. I can see why it's so popular. And I'm going to continue using it for a little bit longer, and I'm also going to upgrade Ubuntu 19.10 to 20.04 and use that for a while too, so I'll use them both simultaneously. And who knows, I might end up making Manjaro Linux my main distribution. Anyways, thank you all for watching. See you later.